She told the cop her dad was in special forces. He laughed in her face until the doors opened and her father walked in wearing the uniform. You ever notice how sometimes a normal day can flip upside down in seconds? One minute, everything feels calm, familiar, and the next, you're in a situation you never imagined. That's exactly how it went for Tiana Brooks on a Saturday she'll never forget. It was around 2:30 p.m. at the Northgate Mall in Tacoma, Washington. The kind of place families go to grab lunch, catch a movie, or browse the latest sneakers. Kids ran past the food court carrying cups of frozen yogurt. Couples argued playfully over what to eat, and overhead, the dull pop music played just loud enough to fill the silence between conversations. Tiana sat alone at a small round table near the fountain, her backpack at her feet, sipping a strawberry smoothie through a purple straw. She was 14, wearing a navy hoodie, jeans, and white sneakers. Just a regular teenager, waiting for her dad to pick her up after a shopping trip with two friends who had already left. She checked her phone. A message from her dad, Sergeant Major Darius Brooks, popped up. "Running 10 minutes late. Be there soon, sweetheart." She smiled faintly and replied, "No rush, I'm just people watching." That was something she got from him. Patience. Darius had taught her to stay calm, think before reacting. He was strict, sure, but in a steady, protective way. She admired him more than she ever said out loud. Across from her, a group of security guards talked near a store entrance. She didn't pay them much attention, but one of them kept glancing in her direction. She wondered if maybe she was sitting too close to the fountain or blocking the walkway. So she gathered her shopping bags and adjusted her seat. Then came the announcement, a sharp, metallic voice through the mall speakers. "Attention, security to level 1 near the food court. Possible shoplifting suspect in the area. Female, mid-teens, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans." Tiana froze. She looked around, instinctively tugging at her hoodie strings. There were dozens of girls dressed just like her. For a moment, she brushed it off. Surely it wasn't about her. But then she saw one of the guards pointing subtly in her direction. A tightness gripped her chest. Her first thought wasn't guilt. It was confusion. "Wait, what?" she muttered under her breath. She glanced at her reflection in the glass panel beside her table. Did she look suspicious? She hadn't even entered any store alone. Then she noticed people slowing down as they walked past, their eyes flickering toward her, curious, cautious. A woman whispered something to her friend. Someone else pulled out their phone. Tiana swallowed hard. She could feel her heartbeat quickening. She reached for her phone and called her dad. No answer. She texted quickly, "Dad, can you hurry? Something weird is happening." At that same moment, a tall man in a dark blue uniform, badge glinting under the fluorescent lights, walked briskly toward her. The way people stepped aside made it clear. He was law enforcement. He stopped a few feet away, eyes scanning her table, her bag, her hands. "Hey, young lady," he said in a tone that was neither friendly nor polite. "Mind telling me what you're doing here?" Tiana blinked, startled. Waiting for my dad. He's on his way." The man crossed his arms. "What's your name?" Tiana Brooks." He wrote something on a small notepad, eyes never leaving her. "You been in any stores today?" Yeah, I went into a few with my friends. But I didn't take anything, if that's what you're asking." His lips curved into something like a smirk. "Nobody said you did. Just answering a few questions." The people around them slowed down, pretending not to stare, but clearly listening. Tiana's hands began to tremble slightly. She didn't want to cry. Not here, not in front of strangers. "Sir, can I just call my dad? He's literally 5 minutes away," she said softly. The officer raised an eyebrow. "Sure, what does your dad do?" "He's in the Army. Special Forces." That's when it happened. The laugh. Not loud, but sharp enough to sting. "Special Forces, huh?" "That's a new one." He chuckled, shaking his head. "You kids really come up with anything these days." Something inside her shrank. Not because she was lying, but because she wasn't being believed. The mix of doubt and mockery in his voice made her wish she could disappear into the tiled floor. She looked down at her phone again, whispering to herself, "Please, Dad, hurry up." But the tension in that food court was just getting started. Officer Mark Delaney stood tall, his hand resting casually near his duty belt. He wasn't pointing his weapon or anything like that, but the weight of authority hung between them. The badge, the radio, the uniform. They all said one thing: "You don't argue with me." Tiana's voice wavered. Sir, I really didn't do anything. You can check my bags if you want. He looked down at the shopping bags on the floor. Shoes, a hoodie, a gift from a beauty store. He nudged one with the tip of his boot. You mind if I take a look? Go ahead, she said quickly, trying to sound calm. He crouched and opened one. Inside, perfectly folded receipts were visible, each one matching the store logos. He held one up like it was evidence in a trial. You always keep receipts this neat? I like to keep things organized, she said softly. My dad taught me that. Delaney exhaled through his nose, unimpressed. Right. Your dad, the Special Forces guy, right? Tiana nodded. Yes, sir. He chuckled again. That same condescending, I don't believe you kind of laugh. You realize that's not something people just say lightly, right? Special Forces? That's a big claim. She clenched her jaw, holding back tears. I'm not claiming anything. It's the truth. People were watching openly now. A few teenagers had their phones out, pretending to text, but clearly recording. A mother pulled her young son a little closer. One of the mall security guards lingered nearby, whispering into his radio. Tiana felt her chest tighten. She hated the way people were looking at her, not as a person, but as a problem. Delaney stood back up, towering over her small table. Look, Tiana, someone called about a girl who matched your description. You fit the part. Now, if you really haven't done anything, you've got nothing to worry about. But I am worried, she said, her voice breaking slightly, because I didn't do anything, and you don't believe me. He frowned, folding his arms again. You got an attitude now? No, sir. I'm just trying to explain. Then explain why a store clerk said you were acting nervous inside her store. She blinked. Because I was trying to find my wallet in my bag. I dropped it. That's all. All. He stared at her for a long moment, like he was searching for something in her eyes. Then he sighed. All right. Stay right here while I confirm something. He stepped aside to talk on his radio. Tiana could hear fragments. Female minor. Possible match. Waiting on confirmation. Her phone buzzed again. It was her dad. Almost there. What's going on? She typed quickly. There's a cop here. He thinks I stole something. Please hurry. Her hands shook so badly that she nearly dropped the phone. When Delaney returned, his tone was clipped. You said your dad's military, right? What's his rank? Sergeant Major, she said. He snorted. Oh, so he's that high up, huh? She hesitated, then nodded. Delaney glanced around, half amused, half skeptical. I've met plenty of people who say that kind of thing when they're in trouble. It's cute, but it doesn't make this go away. Her heart pounded so loud she could hear it in her ears. Sir, I'm not lying. He tilted his head, pretending to consider it. You know, lying to an officer isn't smart. You're young, so I'll let that slide. The words hit her like a slap. She bit her lip and looked down, fighting to keep her composure. She didn't want to cry in front of him. She didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. Behind her, someone whispered, Is that the girl they were talking about? Another voice muttered, Looks like it. Tiana turned away, staring hard at the floor tiles. She could feel the heat of their stares. The humiliation settled deep, heavier than fear. She whispered under her breath, Please, God, just let Dad get here soon. Delaney's radio crackled. He turned, listening to a voice on the other end. Yeah, that's the description, the dispatcher said, but the suspect was last seen running toward the west exit, not sitting in the food court. Delaney's expression flickered, but only for a second. He looked back at her. All right, sit tight anyway. I'll clear this up. Tiana took a shaky breath. She wanted to believe him, but his tone hadn't changed. Still sharp, still condescending. Her phone buzzed again. This time, she didn't have to answer. Through the glass doors at the far end of the food court, she saw a familiar black SUV pull up to the curb. Her father's vehicle. Her relief was instant, like air filling her lungs again. Sir, she said, standing up slowly. My dad's here. Delaney gave a short laugh. Oh, is he now? The Special Forces hero? She didn't answer. She just watched as the doors slid open and her father stepped through. Tall, broad-shouldered, his uniform immaculate, ribbons shining on his chest. The sound of his boots on the polished tile echoed across the food court. Conversations faded, people turned. Even the guards straightened. Delaney's smirk faltered just slightly. But what happened next would silence the entire mall. The moment Sergeant Major Darius Brooks stepped inside the food court, the air shifted. It wasn't loud, but it felt like every sound, the chatter, the scraping of chairs, the echo of footsteps, suddenly dropped to half volume. He wasn't just walking, he was moving with purpose. His uniform was crisp, the metals neatly aligned, the creases so sharp they looked ironed by precision itself. Every detail spoke of discipline and pride. Tiana's heart jumped at the sight of him. Relief mixed with embarrassment. She wanted to run to him to explain what happened, but she could barely move. Everyone's eyes were on her and the man now cutting through the crowd. Officer Delaney noticed the attention too. He turned his head and frowned slightly, confused by the shift in energy. Darius approached, his eyes steady, his posture unshakable. When he stopped beside his daughter, his deep voice carried across the space. "Is there a problem here, officer?" Delaney blinked, hesitating for the first time. Up close, the man in front of him wasn't just a parent. He was someone who commanded respect without saying much. His chest bore ribbons that told a story. Years of service, deployments, sacrifice. Delaney cleared his throat. "I was just speaking with your daughter. There's been a misunderstanding, that's all." "Is that right?" Darius asked calmly, his tone even. "Because from where I'm standing, she looks scared and you look nervous." A murmur rippled through the onlookers. Someone whispered, "That's her dad?" Another voice replied, "He's military." "Look at that uniform." Delaney straightened, trying to regain his footing. "Sir, I received a report of a possible shoplifting suspect matching her description. I was doing my job." Darius tilted his head slightly. "And did you find any evidence that my daughter did anything wrong?" Delaney hesitated. "Not exactly, but what?" Darius interrupted, his voice low but firm. "You questioned a 14-year-old girl in public, searched her belongings, and made her cry. All because someone thought she looked like someone else?" The officer's mouth opened, then closed. He shifted uncomfortably. "Sir, I didn't mean any harm." "I was just following procedure," Darius repeated, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I've trained men on real procedures, officer." "This isn't it." There was no yelling, no anger, just control. That kind of calm that only made his words hit harder. Tiana stood beside her father, eyes red from holding back tears. She whispered, "Dad, he didn't believe me." "He laughed when I told him about you." Darius turned his head slightly toward her. "It's all right, baby. You don't have to explain." Then he looked back at Delaney. "You laughed at her?" Delaney shifted his weight, his face reddening. "I may have thought she was exaggerating." The silence that followed was heavy. Even the food court employees had stopped working. A young man at a nearby table lowered his phone. He had been recording the whole thing. Darius took a slow step forward. "When my daughter tells you I serve in the Special Forces, you don't get to laugh. You verify. You ask questions, but you do not humiliate her." Delaney's radio crackled again, the dispatcher's voice coming through. "Officer Delaney, update. The suspect has been detained near the west exit, not the food court. Repeat, suspect apprehended." All eyes turned to Delaney. He froze. The confirmation landed like a punch. Darius folded his arms. "So now we both know you had the wrong person." I see that now," Delaney muttered, lowering his gaze. "I apologize, sir." Darius didn't move. He didn't yell, didn't gloat. He just let the moment sit. Tiana reached for his hand, her grip trembling. He gave a small squeeze, his expression unreadable, part frustration, part exhaustion. "I served 22 years in this country," he said quietly, eyes still on Delaney. "I've worn this uniform through sandstorms and gunfire. But somehow, my daughter can't sit in a mall food court without being treated like a suspect." No one said a word. Even Delaney's face softened, shame flickering behind his rigid stance. A few people clapped softly, hesitant at first, then more joined in. Not a celebration, but a quiet acknowledgement of the truth. Darius turned to his daughter. "Let's go home, sweetheart." She nodded, her voice cracked as she whispered, "Okay." They walked away slowly, the crowd parting as they passed. Delaney stood frozen, his eyes following them. He wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Outside, as the glass doors closed behind them, Tiana finally exhaled. Her father glanced down at her, his tone softening. "You all right?" She nodded, wiping a tear. "Yeah, I just, didn't think people would ever look at me like that." He gave a half smile, though there was sadness behind it. "Sometimes they will, baby girl. But how you carry yourself after, that's what defines you." But inside the mall, the moment wasn't over yet, because what Darius said next would echo long after they left. The doors had barely closed behind Darius and Tiana when Officer Delaney took a long breath, the kind of breath that felt heavier than air. The food court had gone silent, except for the faint hum of conversation starting up again. He could feel eyes on him. He didn't have to look to know people were shaking their heads. He'd been a cop for 15 years. He'd handled real suspects, real crimes. But this was something different. The look that man gave him, calm, disappointed, not even angry, had hit harder than a punch. One of the mall managers, a short man in a gray vest, walked over nervously. "Officer, looks like there was a mix-up. The suspect they caught was carrying stolen merchandise from that shoe store. She didn't look much like the girl you stopped." Delaney rubbed his forehead, suddenly aware of how tight his jaw had been. "Yeah," he muttered. "I know." The manager hesitated. "Maybe you should go talk to them. Make things right?" Delaney didn't answer at first. His pride wanted to say no, to just walk away, pretend the moment never happened. But something told him he couldn't. Outside, in the parking lot, Tiana sat quietly on the hood of her father's SUV. Her head was down, fingers tracing the edge of her phone. Darius stood beside her, his hands resting on his hips, watching the reflection of the setting sun on the mall's glass doors. He hadn't said much since they walked out. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. Tiana finally broke it. "Dad, I didn't do anything wrong. Why did he look at me like that?" Darius turned to her, eyes softening. "Because some people don't see what's real. They see what they expect to see. It's not about you, baby. It's about them." Her eyes glistened. "It's not fair." He gave a small nod. "You're right. It's not." Then came the sound of approaching footsteps. Both of them turned. Officer Delaney walked toward them, his hat now off, his uniform slightly rumpled. The confident swagger he'd had earlier was gone. Darius straightened, protective instinct kicking in. "Officer." Delaney stopped a few feet away. He cleared his throat. "Sir, Miss Brooks, I owe both of you an apology." Tiana looked away, not wanting to meet his eyes. "I made an assumption," Delaney continued. "I shouldn't have. I handled it wrong, and I let my ego get in the way. I'm sorry for embarrassing you in front of all those people." Darius studied him for a moment. His gaze wasn't harsh, just steady. "Do you know what's worse than being wrong, officer?" he asked quietly. Delaney shook his head. "Being certain while you're wrong." The officer swallowed hard. "You're right about that. You saw a kid sitting by herself and thought she fit your report. But you didn't ask the right questions. You didn't listen. You reacted." Delaney looked down. "I did." Tiana shifted slightly, her voice soft but clear. "You laughed at me." Delaney looked up, regret etched across his face. "I know. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry, kiddo. That was uncalled for." Her lips trembled, but she nodded faintly. Darius crossed his arms. "You ever have kids, officer?" Delaney nodded slowly. "A daughter. She's 12. Then you already know how this feels," Darius said. "You'd never want her treated like that. Not even for a second." Delaney exhaled sharply, the weight of the words settling in. "You're right," he said quietly. "I wouldn't." There was a long pause, the kind where everything that needed to be said already was, but no one wanted to break the silence. Darius finally extended his hand. "It takes something to own a mistake. I'll give you that." Delaney looked at the hand for a moment, then shook it firmly. "Thank you, sir." "Just remember," Darius said, lowering his voice, "you don't need to be perfect." Just aware, Delaney nodded. "I'll do better." Then he turned to Tiana. "You have a good father, and you handled yourself with more patience than most adults I know. I hope you can forgive me someday." Tiana hesitated, then whispered, "I'll try." Delaney gave a small nod and walked back toward the mall. The evening air was cool now, and the parking lot lights had flickered on. Darius let out a long breath, the kind that carried both frustration and relief. "You okay?" he asked gently. Tiana nodded, though her voice wavered. "Yeah, I just wish it didn't happen at all." He put a hand on her shoulder. "You can't control what people think, but you can control how you rise above it. You kept your head high, that matters." She leaned into him slightly, resting her head on his arm. "Thanks, Dad." He smiled faintly. "Anytime, soldier." They stood there for a moment, just breathing, before he finally said, "Come on, let's get some dinner. I know a place that does the best chicken sandwiches in town." She chuckled softly. "You're trying to bribe me with food." He grinned. "Is it working?" She smiled for the first time that afternoon. Maybe. But as they drove off, Tiana didn't know that the video from that mall, the one someone had recorded, was already spreading online, and the story was far from over. That night, the Brooks household was unusually quiet. The TV was on but muted, flickering light bouncing across the living room walls. Tiana sat, curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through her phone with tired eyes. Her father had made her favorite dinner, grilled chicken and mac and cheese, but she'd barely eaten. The moment in the mall kept looping in her mind like a stuck video. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw faces staring, phones recording, the look on that officer's face when he laughed. Darius sat across from her, polishing his boots at the coffee table. It was something he did to unwind, a habit from years in the service. "You've been quiet," he said finally. She shrugged. "I just keep thinking, what if you hadn't come when you did?" He looked up. "Then you still would have done the right thing. You stayed calm. That's what I taught you." "Yeah, but it didn't help," she said, voice cracking. "He didn't care. He already made up his mind about me before I said anything." Darius set the brush down and leaned back. "Sometimes the world's like that. People see what they expect, not what's true. But when they're shown the truth, when they can't ignore it, that's where change starts." She frowned. "You really think so?" He nodded. "I've seen it happen before. One person opens their eyes and it spreads. But he didn't know how true that was about to be, because across town, someone had already uploaded the mall footage. The video was shaky, grainy, a few minutes long, but powerful. The title read, "Cop Laughs at Black Teen," until her dad in uniform shows up. By midnight, it had thousands of views. By morning, it had hundreds of thousands. News outlets picked it up. Social media exploded. Hashtags flooded timelines. Some people were furious, others heartbroken. Many praised how calmly Darius handled it, how he never once raised his voice, even when he had every right to. At the local police station, Officer Delaney walked into the briefing room to find his name already printed in bold on a stack of internal reports. His captain, a stern woman named Lieutenant Reyes, handed him a folder. "You've seen the video?" she asked. He nodded. "Yes, ma'am." "You know this department doesn't tolerate that kind of behavior. Mocking, profiling, public humiliation. You'll be suspended pending review." He didn't argue. He didn't even try to defend himself. "I understand." Reyes paused. "What were you thinking, Mark?" He sighed, looking down at his hands. "I wasn't. I just saw a kid who fit the description. I thought I was doing my job, but I made it about me, about being right, not about being fair." Reyes's expression softened just slightly. "You've been a good officer for years. Learn from this. Don't let it be the last thing people remember you for." He nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." Meanwhile, back at the Brooks house, Darius was already receiving calls. Journalists, advocacy groups, even the local news station wanted interviews. He turned most of them down. He didn't want to turn that moment into a spectacle. But one evening, he sat down with Tiana at the kitchen table. "You know, people are talking about what happened," he said gently. "I saw," she admitted. "Everyone at school's probably going to bring it up. You okay with that?" She hesitated. "I think so. I mean, maybe it's good people saw it. Maybe it'll make them think twice before judging someone." He smiled faintly. "That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." She tilted her head. "Are you mad it's online?" "No," he said, shaking his head. "Embarrassed, maybe. But if our story makes one person pause before assuming something about someone else, then it's worth it." She leaned back, her expression softening. I guess that's a good thing. He reached over and tapped the side of her head lightly. And next time, don't let anyone's disbelief shake what you know is true. You spoke with honesty. That's strength, not weakness. She smiled, for real this time. Outside, rain began tapping against the window. The storm rolled through softly, steady and calm. Nothing like the chaos from the day before. But even as peace settled in at home, the world outside was still reacting. And soon, Tiana would realize the story had grown bigger than she ever imagined. The week after the video went viral, life felt different. Everywhere Tiana Brooks went, she felt people watching her. Not in a bad way, just curious. At school, some students whispered, others smiled at her in the hallway. One morning before class, her friend Kayla slid into the seat next to her. "Girl, I saw that video. That was you. I can't believe how calm you were." Tiana gave a small shrug. "I wasn't calm. I was scared." "Still," Kayla said, shaking her head, "you handled that better than I ever could have." Tiana smiled faintly. "My dad says keeping your cool doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger than the noise around you." Kayla nodded. "Your dad's right." That man walked in like a superhero. Tiana chuckled. "He's not a superhero. He's just my dad." But that wasn't completely true. That day at the mall changed something inside her. Before, her dad's stories about discipline and respect felt distant, something from his world. Now she understood them. They weren't just lessons about behavior. They were armor for moments when people refused to see her clearly. Later that evening, Darius was reading in the living room when the doorbell rang. Tiana peeked through the window and froze. Standing outside, holding his hat nervously, was Officer Mark Delaney. She looked back at her father. "It's him." Darius stood, calm as ever. "Let him in." When he opened the door, Delaney looked like a different man. No uniform, just jeans and a gray jacket. His shoulders slumped slightly, like he'd been carrying something heavy for days. "Sergeant Brooks," he began, voice low, "I wanted to see you both in person. Not as a cop, not as an officer, just as a man who got it wrong." Darius gestured toward the couch. "Come in." Delaney sat on the edge, hands clasped together. Tiana stayed by the doorway, watching quietly. "I've been on the force 15 years, Delaney said. "Thought I'd seen everything. But that day, I saw myself act like the kind of person I swore I'd never become. I made your daughter feel small for no reason. I made her scared." Darius listened, silent. Delaney continued, "After the video, people said all kinds of things about me. Some I deserved, some I didn't. But the truth is, none of it hit harder than hearing my own daughter ask me if I'd ever treat her friend like that." Tiana's eyes softened. "She asked you that?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, she said, 'Dad, what if that girl had been me?' And I didn't have an answer." The room was quiet, except for the ticking clock on the wall. Darius leaned forward, his tone calm but firm. "You can't change what happened, officer. But you can decide what kind of man you'll be from now on." Delaney nodded. "That's what I'm trying to do. I started volunteering with the youth program downtown. I figured if I could spend more time listening instead of assuming, maybe I can rebuild some trust." Tiana finally spoke. "That's good." Delaney met her eyes. "You didn't deserve what happened. I hope one day you'll remember me for this moment, not that one." Tiana took a slow breath. "I already do. Everyone makes mistakes. It's what you do after that shows who you are." Delaney blinked, visibly moved. "You're wiser than most adults I know." Darius smiled faintly. That's her mother in her. For the first time, all three of them laughed softly, not out of humor, but out of relief. When Delaney stood to leave, he extended his hand to Tiana. "Thank you for hearing me out." She shook it gently. "Thank you for coming." He nodded to Darius, then walked out into the cool evening air. As the door closed, Tiana turned to her father. "You think people really change?" Darius looked thoughtful. "I think they can, if they care enough to face who they were." She leaned against him, her voice soft. "I think he meant it." "I think so too," he said quietly. They stood there a moment, the house peaceful again, the weight of the past week finally starting to lift. But what Darius didn't tell her was that change doesn't happen in big speeches. It happens in small, quiet choices, every single day. A few days later, the story started to fade from the headlines. The noise online slowed down. New stories took its place, as they always do. But for the Brooks family, the lesson stuck. Life moved forward, but something in Tiana had changed forever. She wasn't scared anymore, not of being misunderstood, not of standing her ground. What she went through taught her that truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it just waits for the right moment to be seen. On a sunny Saturday, Darius took her out to the same mall again. Same parking lot, same food court. At first, she didn't want to go back. The memory was still sharp, but he said it was important. As they walked inside, Tiana glanced at the tables, the fountain, the store where everything started. People looked at them differently now. Some smiled politely, others nodded in recognition. One of the food court workers even waved. "You see," Darius said gently, "this place didn't change." "But you did. You walked back in here with your head high." Tiana smiled. "Yeah, feels weird, but good weird." They sat down at the same table. She took a deep breath. "You really think people can learn from what happened?" "I think people saw something real," he said. "A kid who told the truth, even when no one listened. A father who stood up without shouting, and a man who learned humility the hard way. That's 3 lessons in one moment." She smiled. "Guess it was worth it then." He chuckled softly. "Nothing's ever worth the pain, baby girl. But what we do with it, that's where the meaning comes from." A few minutes later, a young mother walked by with her son. She stopped, hesitated, then turned to Darius. "Excuse me," she said quietly. Are you the man from that video?" Darius looked up, a little surprised. "Yes, ma'am." She smiled. "I just wanted to say thank you." I showed it to my son. I told him that's what respect looks like. Her boy, maybe 8 or 9, gave a shy wave. Darius smiled back. "Glad it meant something to you both." As they left, Tiana looked at her father and grinned. "You're famous now." He laughed. "Let's hope not for long." They both chuckled, but deep down she understood something important. Her dad wasn't proud because people saw him on the internet. He was proud because, even in the middle of humiliation and injustice, they had chosen dignity over anger, patience over pride. That night, back home, Tiana wrote in her journal. She didn't write about the embarrassment or the stares. She wrote about courage, about how hard it is to stay calm when someone doubts you, about how being right doesn't mean being loud. Her final line read, "Sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that stays steady when everyone else loses theirs." She closed the book and placed it beside her bed. Downstairs, Darius looked at a framed photo of him and Tiana from years ago. Her in pigtails, smiling wide, sitting on his shoulders. He whispered quietly to himself, "You handled it better than I ever could have, baby girl." Then he turned off the lights and walked away. But if there's one thing that story reminded everyone watching, it's that respect isn't about rank or age or uniform. It's about seeing people for who they are, not who you assume them to be. When we rush to judge, we forget that everyone carries a story we can't see, a truth we haven't heard yet. So before you point a finger, before you laugh, before you decide who someone is based on how they look or where they're sitting, take a breath. Because the person you're judging might just be telling the truth, and you might be the one who needs to listen. If this story moved you, share it. Talk about it. Teach it. Remind someone that empathy costs nothing, but changes everything. Because sometimes, all it takes is one moment, one choice, to show what kind of person you really are.